Y'all are worried about the fragments, the reverse mochas, the OG mochas, but these are probably the hardest Travis Scott Jordan 1 low to legit check. What's up, sneaker people? It's your boy FB Kicks and Gear, and I am back with another video. I apologize for my lack of uploads in the month of November. It was a pretty busy time for me. I've had a sick child, holiday stuff, family stuff, but I am back to grinding out these videos so that we can keep the community updated. And speaking of the community, remember, join the Discord, link in the description. We come together, we talk about retail releases, we talk about the challenges that the replica releases are really posing for people that are looking for authentic shoes, and we pretty much talk about anything and everything that comes to mind. So join the community, let's link up and let's talk sneakers. But yeah, today we have our latest legit checking guide on the Travis Scott 1 Low Phantom, and I'll say this is probably my least favorite. Well, it's a toss-up between the olive lows and these as my least favorite Travis Scott Jordan 1 Low, but even as my least favorite, they still rank pretty high in terms of the Jordan 1 Low silhouette for me. I don't give any of the Travis Scott Jordan 1 Lows a rating of like less than 8 out of 10, so still very good, and I know that they are still very sought after, and there are, even though they are my least favorite color, they are probably one of the more unique Travis Scott Jordan 1 lows. So there's still a demand for it. Prices are still pretty ridiculous for it, and they're only getting higher. So with that, we always got to keep up these updated legit check guides because it's the only thing that is keeping you from getting burned. So with all that said, we have my authentic pair here on the left, and we have the rep pair here on the right. And remember that you can go to the Instagram page in the description so that you can see all of the detailed photos you need of this shoe to be able to start educating yourself and doing the legit check guides, because you guys know here we're all about education on this channel, and the small details matter. So with that said, let's get into this breakdown. And the first place that we start when we start talking about our legit check guides is always with the box, because even though nobody wears the box and the accessories can point to signs of authenticity or signs that you're dealing with a replica. So let's do that. So firstly, I apologize because my authentic box isn't in the best condition, but still better condition than the replicas. But you guys know the deal with those. Most of the time replica boxes come trashed because that's how they arrive here in the United States. But you're really looking at a completely black box. Part of it has like the shiny embossed kind of characters on it. Obviously you've got the Nike Air, the Wings logo, Cactus Jack, and that face, and that kind of translates here to the Nike logo on there and on the top of the box underneath the sleeve. Taking a look at the replica box, the one thing that I can say is that overall the box definitely feels lighter and less rigid than the authentic pair. You can also see where the gloss lines up with all the lines of all of the shapes and everything here on the rep. It almost has like a weird 3D effect where they laid down the gloss offset from the outline of the shape. So you can see on all the various different shapes that they're actually not centered within the embossing themselves. And when you feel them up close, they don't feel substantial at all. They feel a lot flatter. You can really feel the gloss as opposed to the ridges of all of the shapes. So that's definitely a good sign when you're comparing authentic to fake. This time the box sizes are identical, so that's not something you can really look at. The next thing that we want to look at is the size tag on the box. And if you guys remember, my only two tips when looking at the box tag is that when it identifies an RFID tag on there by this little symbol, it's a little bit cut off on my authentic pair, but when it calls out an RFID tag, look for that RFID tag. You can usually see it underneath the label. It sticks out on a black box. It's actually a little bit easier to see. I can see it here in person in the studio, but I don't know if you guys can actually see it. I think you can. You can see kind of like a squarish outline behind the text. If it calls for an RFID tag, make sure it's there. the rep obviously calls for an RFID tag here, but actually this rep does have an RFID tag, and you can kind of see it in the outline behind the tag. So there are some reps that don't go as far as to putting the RFID tag in there, but this one does. And you can kind of see this like white border beneath the text that really stands out against the black box, but there is an RFID tag there. So you're probably asking, well, if they both have RFID tags, what's the point of looking at the tags themselves? Well, the good thing about when it comes to legit checking the box labels, you can always go to the smallest text on the label here. It tends to be the made in China underneath all of the sizing. And you can look at the font, weight, and size of that. When you look at the rep, it's either too bold or too thin, or just not in line with what the authentic pair looks like. In this case, it's super light. The lettering is super thin, that made in China right underneath there. But when you look at the authentic, it's definitely more bold and prominent. The weight of the text is similar, but you can still see that difference. So that's usually what it comes down to when you're looking at the box. And I'm not really going to go that much more in depth into it, just because there are better indicators that you can look at. You got to remember that we're all building up to the bigger picture of whether or not a shoe is authentic or fake. For these shoes in particular, one of the things that I like to focus on is the bandanas that come with the shoes. The bandanas themselves are actually pretty thin. They're not that substantial. Kind of feels like they were an afterthought to Jordan Brand, but you can see the different symbols. You can see the color, which is like a purplish kind of color going around for all of the designs, paired with that light Orwood, which is essentially off-white. And you look on the back, you see that it's kind of faded, but not really. It's just the reverse side of the bandana. When I pick up the rep, it definitely feels a little bit heavier and thicker than the authentic pair. And one of the things that I notice immediately is that the shapes seem to be more defined on the rep than on the authentic bandana. So let's see, let's take this Jumpman Jordan right here, and you can compare it directly to the rep version on the right. Take a look at the difference in colors of the purple. Take a look at the defined edges of the rep, while the authentic just seems to be a little bit fuzzier and less defined. The blacks are also slightly different. This is definitely more of a deeper black, and it appears that way because this is a thicker bandana as well. So you can see that side by side. The authentic version is almost a little bit more dingy, if that makes sense. And when you flip to the back, you can see night and day difference. It almost looks like this, the back side of this is printed, and whatever that reverse side is, it's just a lot more bold and prominent than on the authentic. So the bandanas really tell a story, and it's really easy to differentiate the real bandanas from the fake ones. But now that we've got the accessories in the box out of the way, let's talk about the shoes. Now, in my previous videos, when it comes to the Travis Scott Jordan 1 Low Phantom, I point out a lot that this suede that is all around the shoe is different. And it's different in the sense that, like, you can see that it's not like a raw suede. It looks like it's almost treated with like wax or something that kind of gives it this shiny look in some areas. And that is something that many reps really struggle to replicate. And when you look at the suede up here, you kind of sort of see it in the flatness, but that waxy look just isn't there. And you can see it here side by side up here at the top, or I should say at the back of the shoe. See how the light kind of hits off of it? It's definitely just a less impactful version of what is on the authentic pair, but they look and more or less feel the same. The rep definitely feels a little bit softer, while the authentic pair feels a little bit more matted and waxy, if that makes sense. But outside of that, overall, the materials feel very similar, especially the nubuck. They're using a regular flat nubuck here. Very soft on the rep, to the point where you can see motion and almost that three-dimensional effect that we tend to see on Travis Scott Jordan 1s that have nubuck, and definitely not nearly as much motion on the authentic pair. You can see that what I like to call almost thread density or fiber density, if that makes sense. There's just a lot more hairs on the rep pair than on the Authentic, which allows for this motion, while the Authentic pair just doesn't have that. So some would argue that this would be a higher quality nubuck, and I'm not a materials expert per se, so I can't really tell you that, but I can say that it feels softer and it feels more premium on the rep than it does on the Authentic. But overall, when you start going around the shoe, you can see while the grades of nubuck are very similar, the colors kind of vary. One of the things that the Authentic pair has going on is that it's a mix of like deep blacks and ashy blacks, and the reps do that in a similar way, but the shades just come out a little bit different. You can see on the reverse swoosh of the Authentic pair that it almost looks green, while the rep uses the same consistent nubuck that is on the toe box and that's on the side panels on the reverse swoosh as well, where it is just different. It's using a different like piece of nubuck on the reverse swoosh than it is on the rest of the shoe for the Authentic pair. So pay attention to that. I guess I would say if I'm going to point to one thing, it's going to be pay attention to consistency of materials on the replica pairs, because it seems like they're using the same cut of nubuck all the way around, when my Authentic pair does not seem to be doing that. But I mean, even between the Authentic left shoe and the Authentic right shoe, you're seeing some difference, inconsistency. But I think that's the name of the game there, right? Like, it's just different. It's patchwork. While the replica pair definitely seems to be using a little bit more consistent nubucks all the way around. So, but that's the nature of nubuck, though, right? Like, it's gonna vary. It's gonna be different. So, just pay attention to that. The next thing that I will point to is the color of the midsole and the outsole. I like to do this back view here because it tends to show those differences, if there are any, a lot better. And from what I can see, there are some slight differences in color. It looks like the rep pair is just a deeper black on the midsole than on the Authentic. Very slight, but I get a little bit of gray vibes from the Authentic and more of a almost like a dark navy blue for the rep. And then when you turn to the outsoles, they look more or less the same, maybe a slight color difference, but very difficult to tell. That's the difficulty with having an all black base shoe. There's only so many ways that you can fuck up doing all black, and they're not really fucking it up. So, but from there, you can take a look at the embroidery. I will say that the rep embroidery has come leaps and bounds since I first did a review on this. And while there's variation between Authentic pairs, one of the things that the reps would just do wrong is that you would see that the way these black spaces in between this fly or B or whatever the hell it is would just be super sloppy and inconsistent, while the Authentic pairs just seem to have it pretty controlled, and now they're really mimicking that shape pretty well. But you guys know that when it comes to embroidery like this, I don't put too much stock into it because they do vary a lot, especially when you're looking at the Air Jordan Wings logo on the back. It always looks like shit on Authentic pairs, so I don't expect it to look much better on the rep, and it really doesn't. To be honest, this is a pretty shitty logo to do in all embroidery, but that's what they do for Jordan 1 Low OG, so it is what it is. But take a look at that. You can also see a slight shape difference when it comes to the height of the shoe, and you see a little bit more thickness on the rep than you do on the Authentic pair, but more or less you're seeing similar vibes here. You do see how the Authentic suede is a little bit more matte, a little bit more waxy than on the rep, but that's the name of the game across the board for reps from what I've been able to see. The next thing that I want to look at is the insoles, and the reason I want to look at the insoles is because there is a pretty consistent tell for other Travis Scott 1 Low models, and it has to do with a specific graphic on the insole. So let me take it out and we'll do the comparison. So as we've seen with other Travis Scott Jordan 1 Lows, there seems to be a little bit of a struggle between the rep factories to match what I think is a pretty simple graphic on the Authentic pair, but it has been a telltale sign, and it is an immediate legit checking indicator when it comes to this shoe, and it looks like it applies here as well. So as you can see on my left here, I have the insole for the Authentic, and on the right I have the insole for the Rep, and immediately you can see a difference in colors. You can see that the background of the Authentic insole is a little bit more faded out, it's a little bit grayer, while on the Rep it's definitely more of a dark navy blue. But and you can see that the Nike Air colors are definitely different, way more vibrant on the Rep. But the telltale sign, if you don't have an Authentic pair to reference, is the Cactus Jack faces. If you look at the hair on the Cactus Jack of the Authentic pair, you see that the hairs are well defined, they're skinny, they're not blocky, they're not blotchy. But when you look at the Rep, it's the exact opposite. It's blocky, it's blotchy, it's not well defined. And this seems to be, believe it or not, the easiest tell that I've been able to look at for the Travis Scott Jordan 1 lows that have this insole. It's super easy to tell, and I don't know why ref factories don't get it right. I don't understand why they can't copy it directly, but it has been my secret go-to legit checking indicator for especially for the olives as well. So that's a really good sign. Please use that to legit check, because even if you don't have an Authentic pair to reference, you can pull up one of my videos and you can check to see which hair matches the one that you have. If you have something that looks like this, guaranteed fake. Now, another go-to that I like to check is the laces, specifically the only laces that come with the shoe, the only other laces that come with the shoe, I should say, the checkered laces as well as the red laces. Rep factories tend to, while they get the overall look correct and the style of the lace right, they tend to not get the colors to match exactly. So when I look at the Authentic lace, you see that the checkered ones are of a black and like a cream light or wood color, and Reps tend to have just black and like bright white. And when you look at the Rep lace here, definitely what's going on. If you look at the lace on the right, which is the Rep, you can see that the Rep is just a brighter white than on the Authentic pair. And this is definitely a lot better than it has been in the past. They're making it a little bit cream when it wasn't that way in the past. And then the next thing to look at is the red laces, and the red laces on the Reps always just tend to be a little bit more vibrant red than the duller red laces on the Authentic pair. So that's still the case, and I don't know why they don't get that right either, but it is what it is. Outside of that, there's really not much to talk about. The lacing, quality, and everything looks pretty good on the Rep compared to the Authentic pair. Very, very similar levels of quality. Placement of the tags look good, color of the tags look good. And I'll do a very, very brief black light test just to see if I can pick up anything different. On the Authentic, nothing really lights up that much. You get a little bit of reactivity out of the stitching and the embroidery, but nothing too crazy, nothing too alarming. You get some reactivity out of the insole, and on the Rep, identical reactivity out of the insole and practically nothing else. So that's it, guys. That's a legit check guide. Just like the olive lows, the easiest way to tell is taking a look at that insole. Everything else, like the box and the bandanas, are also a very good sign. If you're only left with the shoes, obviously, like I said before, the insole is going to be your place to check. So with all that said, guys, remember, join the Discord. Remember, you can see all of the pictures of these that you need on the Instagram account on the screen. Remember to do your research, guys, and stay tuned for more videos. I got a lot more coming up, and especially going into the new year. So with all that said, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.